Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe. Very excited to welcome Andrew Campbell back to the podcast today to talk about Wake in Fright, a movie that was lost for over 30 years, and it's had kind of a resurgence over the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. How are we doing, Andrew?
Hello, thank you. I'm doing great. Still recovering from that movie you made me watch. That really messed up movie.
Every few movies, especially horror films, and ones I haven't seen, I'm not sure how it's going to play out. We're going to talk about it. It gets to this kangaroo hunting sequence where I'm watching this thing. I'm like, I don't know how Andrew's going to be handling all this.
I looked away 100%. I was just like, oh, this is messed up. And like, you know, they do the kangaroo hunting part 1 and then they do the whole part 2. And I was just like, okay, part 2, I was done.
No, I could handle part 1. It was hard, but I was like, okay, it's over. I try not to read too much up on these movies, but I had read that there was a controversial kangaroo hunting sequence. So when we got to that part and it was over in 2-3 minutes, I went, oh, okay, I'm okay. But then they go back at night.
And then they get hands on, and I was like, oh god.
And then they have knives, and I'm like, oh my god.
Now
this is why. Yeah, but that I tried to find. We'll talk about. I was like, is that actually happening? I don't think so. But we'll get into it. So today we're talking about Wake in Fright, starring Donald Pleasence, the great Donald Pleasence, one of my favorites, and Gary Bond. So here's a short synopsis of the movie for those listeners who might not know what it's all about. So this is an Australian horror film, came out in 1971, same year as another famous Australian movie, Walkabout, which I talked about in an Instagram Live last month. So Australia movies going on right now. So let's see. So this is about a school teacher named John Grant who works in a remote Australian town. At the end of his term, as he's a school teacher, at the end of his term, right before the Christmas holidays, John takes a train to the nearby mining town of the Yaba in order to catch a flight to Sydney, but he never makes it to the plane, instead surrendering himself to the wild and ruthless members of the town who like to drink and fight and hunt kangaroos. And in the end, John is never the same. It's kind of like my reading of the movie's summary, the plot. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No. I mean, I think you summarized it pretty well. You forgot the gambling part, because that does stress me out so much, because the thought of gambling, I am the worst gambler. I could never do it.
You get stressed out when they've gained all that money.
I'm like, oh wow, you gained this much money, you should just hang on to it, and no, then that's never how it goes.
There's a sequence. So it's weird. He goes to this town and he's supposed to stay just for a night, right? The next morning he's leaving for Sydney, but he gambles away all of his money. Like he makes a lot of money over the course of the night, and then it's gone.
I think he made like $1,000. And I was like, that was, I mean, for that time. And I think his room was $4 for the night, so like nothing. His steak was $1. I was like, dude, $1,000, like that's like putting it in perspective, which is really helpful for me, because I was just like, if he won $1,000, I was like, is that a lot of money then? Like I haven't studied the history of money, but when they were describing, they come the same prices were mentioned a lot in the movie, and I always thought that really helped me, at least watching it 50 years later, understand like the value of what he won, because when he won $1,000, I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. But like if this was like 2002, I'd be like, okay, $1,000.
Okay, might last you a couple days.
Yeah.
No, it's a lot when he goes into that place and he gets a steak, and it's not just a little steak, it's a giant steak. It goes over the plate, and it comes with eggs on it too, and it comes with the eggs and extras. $1.
Yeah, I was very envious of that. I was like, god, that's the life.
And that's the scene where we meet Donald Pleasence's character, Doc. I didn't mention him in the summary. He lives in this town of the Yaba, and he's a questionable character, as we find out later.
Yes, very questionable.
Very interesting.
I was very interested.
Yeah, he seems one of the more normal people here. When we first meet him, he's just like having a conversation at the table, and I'm like, okay, maybe he'll. And then I'm like, wait, I think this is a horror film. Pleasence might turn, and it's not so much that he turns; it's just he just goes really wild in the second act, which we'll talk about.
He always like widens his eyes every 5 seconds. I'm like that. Yeah, he's scary.
Yeah, this is not Sam Loomis in Wake in Fright. This is a different cat.
Yeah, he's wild.
All right, so before we get to our thoughts on the movie, I have some background info. So this movie was written by Evan Jones and the film's director, Ted Kotcheff, based on the novel by Kenneth Cook. This was Kotcheff's second theatrical feature, following a movie called Two Gentlemen Sharing. He went on to make some famous films, including Fun with Dick and Jane with Jane Fonda, First Blood, the first Rambo movie with Sylvester Stallone, is the director of this movie.
Oh, wow.
He also made Weekend at Bernie's, the classic 80s comedy.
Wow. When you said Fun with Dick and Jane, I was just like, wait, you mean with like Jim Carrey?
No. Yeah, not the 2005 version with Jim, the 1977 version with George, I think it's George Segal and Jane Fonda. Yeah, the original.
Sounds about
So,
right.
I mean, that's kind of interesting that his two most famous movies of the 80s is the serious dramatic action movie First Blood with Stallone and the comedy Weekend at Bernie's. I mean, you can't get any different than those two movies.
Oh my God, no.
I guess you have death in
very
both.
Talented. True, very true.
So it's interesting. Some of these movies like this, Wake in Fright, kind of obscure. I mean, if you don't know your cinema history, I don't think a lot of people would know this title. So I thought, oh, maybe this director, I wonder if he's done anything else. And it's like, oh, no, he did some big stuff later. This was just his second movie. This was the last theatrical feature for Gary Bond, who plays the main character, plays
Really?
John. So he acted all the way into the 1990s, but it was only television after this. Like, I guess
Wow.
I don't know if it was about opportunity or something happened where he couldn't he couldn't appear in any more movies. I don't know.
And I read that he was a theater actor, a pretty big theater
Yeah,
actor,
I think
so
he was
guess,
more of a theater actor than he was a screen actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I also know that he was an openly gay man, and I don't know how. I mean, that definitely could have affected his work opportunities back then, I'm sure. I mean, I know it kind of helped him get this role because of all the homoerotic.
I was like,
scenes.
okay, we're gonna talk about that, but I'm watching this. I'm like, is it just me, or is there some sort of homosexual subtext in this movie? Because
I got it right away.
We flash to his girlfriend on the beach at the beginning, and I'm like, okay. But as we'll talk about that sex scene outside where he vomits, I was like, huh.
It was hot,
Yeah, so he was openly gay. He reportedly was in a relationship with Ian McKellen early in their careers.
Oh.
Have you seen pictures of Ian McKellen when he's young?
I have not, but I would like to.
Like just the most handsome guy. I mean, just gorgeous. And then Gary Bond in this movie, I thought, some of these 70s movies, when the lead is, I'm like, okay, like in the 70s, you didn't have to be attractive to be the lead of the movie, That's kind of like what this decade's all about. But occasionally you get a Gary Bond, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is good.
He's a stunning man. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
I was watching and I was like, I'm interested in this. Okay. And also to me that totally played into the whole homosexual vibes, because I was like, he's a very clean, attractive, beautiful man in this town, and I was like, oh, I know what people probably think of him.
He looks eerily like a young Peter O'Toole, the actor from Lawrence of Arabia and so many movies. He looks like him. I think he had brown hair in real, but he dyed it blonde for this movie, and I guess dyeing it blonde is what really makes him look like a 60s era Peter O'Toole. And he has some nudity in the movie. There's a scene in a hotel room that I was like, okay, this is definitely giving me homosexual vibe, which we'll talk about. But yeah, he was openly gay. He died of AIDS in 1995.
I didn't know
1995. That. I think he was pretty young. I think he was in his 50s, which is really tragic. So let's see what else. Robert Helpman was initially hired to play the role of Doc, but he was replaced with Donald Pleasence due to scheduling conflicts. Michael York, who's in a bunch of stuff, but you might know him best as the boss in Austin Powers in the 3 Austin Powers movies. He stated in a 1980 interview he turned down being in the movie because he was offended by the kangaroo hunting scene. So I guess like early before they shot a frame of film, like I guess it must have been in the script and everything. Like it wasn't like a surprise when they were on set. I think that even though, as we'll talk about, they didn't shoot that stuff with the main actors. It was done at a different time. Gotcha. I guess they were aware. So Gary Bond, for example, and Donald Pleasence would have been aware when they were signing on about that sequence. It wasn't like they went to the premiere and went, "What?" I don't think that's how it worked.
And it's such an interesting, because that scene was so graphic. Me, I understand why he wouldn't want to take on that role, because like to be associated with it could ruin your career. But I was reading about how with that scene, I think it may be in the video thing that you sent me about how because it was legal during that time, they were like, oh, if we show this, we can show the public how brutal and awful it is, and that might help make some changes with the laws of kangaroo hunting. So like basically exposure therapy in a way. Show them, oh, look how awful this is. It's like that ASPCA commercial, Arm to the Angels. It's like you see how awful it is, and you're like, oh my God, we got to do something. We got to help. And I mean, I guess maybe that's the viewpoint they came in with it. We're like, oh, that's the message it can send, and we're down to be a part of it.
Yeah, I've never been so mixed on something in my life, because I'm like, okay, the intention was noble. The intention was to shoot this footage and not only to put it in the movie, but to also share it, I think with like the Australian government or something, footage that was so brutal they couldn't even put it in the movie. And it was footage that actually helped stop a lot of this hunting that was happening anyway at the same time that the movie was being shot. They're not going out there filming this for like the movie. They're just accompanying like a bunch of hunters who were going anyway, and they're just in the back filming it. Like they were going to go out and do it anyway. Yeah. So there is a noble meaning to what they're doing. At the same time, I don't know about you, I do not agree with putting in a fictional movie footage of real animals being harmed and killed. That was where I drew the line there. And I know a lot of critics like love this movie and call it a classic and important, and there's a lot of things that I really admired in the movie that I struggled with. Just that idea of like taking a fictional story and inserting real footage of animals dying and wounded was, I don't know. Have you ever seen that in a movie before?
I have not.
I couldn't think of another movie that did that.
It made me rethink of the movie that we just did.
Sunday Bloody Sunday.
Sunday Bloody Sunday, yeah.
With the dog.
With the dog. And I was like, what is with those guys wanting to see dead animals?
I swear. I swear it was accidental.
Because obviously that was a dog. He was probably just like sedated. Obviously, I don't think they actually killed the dog.
They didn't kill the dog.
Definitely not. But it was definitely a real dog that had been sedated, and like even that was hard to see. Even like the dog's like slumping over and they're dragging out the road. I was like, oh God, like I know this is fake, but this is intense. And then because I was watching the kangaroo scene, at least the second part, because the first one, when they're chasing him, the kangaroos down in the car, and they let the dog out. The dog is chasing it. Yeah. And the dog tackles on tackle. I was like, oh my God, that's awful. Like that's brutal. And it was funny because the kangaroo already had blood on its tail. It was already bleeding while they were doing the chasing. And I was like, oh, they've had to reshoot this probably a couple times with the same kangaroo, which is super sad. I was like, that's intense. And then they ran one down. But I think that part, I don't think that part was real. I don't think it was. I feel like the way that this angled it made it look like the kangaroo got run down. Yeah. But they totally could have. I have no idea. Because I don't know if it was the actors doing that stuff. But yeah, the second part though, I was watching it, and the bodies are flying everywhere, and I got on my phone and I was like, I'm gonna put my phone. I really put my phone in front of my screen. I was like, I'm gonna look this up now because I do not want to see this, but I also want to know if this is real. And I saw it was real, and then I read like, oh, they did this, and the article mentioned how they brought in the whole government stuff, and it's almost like you're combining a documentary with this film, unknowingly, but the audience isn't fully aware of that. But I mean, you're watching it and you're like, oh yeah, those things are totally dying, like 100%. It's too, they don't have effects like that. And at first I was like, are they just doing it because they don't have the effects to do this? They don't want to make it look bad. And I mean, sure enough, no, it was definitely just happening. And I watched the trailer for the movie, and Martin Scorsese had said like, it left his jaw wide open. I was just like, what could it be? And like the first hour in, I'm like, what? Like when's this, moment gonna happen? And then it did. And I was like, oh crap, this is crazy.
Scorsese was a big champion of this movie. He saw it at Cannes.
Yeah, he was. And I remember, and it's funny because you mentioned earlier, like, or if I'm okay with seeing that, because you were definitely not. And as much, I mean, I hated watching it. I will probably never watch that scene ever again. I do understand it now, just knowing the impact it made. They could never do this today, ever. Definitely, unless you're actually watching something about this. I remember there's a documentary I watched that really changed my life and thoughts of shelter dogs. One Nation Under Dog is a documentary just about like homeless dogs in the United States. And in the documentary, they show just them basically just like the hundreds of dead dogs in piles, and they're like using a bulldozer to lift them up and drop them and stuff. And like these bodies are flying around. It's awful. And it was so traumatizing. I hated seeing it. But it really helped me get really involved and more vocal about like animal adoption. I've always been that way, but like that really, really pushed it, and was like, oh my gosh, I feel as if I could never have, get a dog from breeder ever again, just because I've seen how bad it is, and the way that they're euthanized, they're thrown in a dumpster, and they're burned up, and they're burned up in like piles of hundreds, and it's like, God, that's so awful. And,
oh my God.
Seeing that changed my perspective. So I think that maybe had an impact on how I wasn't totally like disgusted with this movie and what they did. It helped me understand it a little bit.
Yeah, it didn't ruin the movie by any means. I actually have a lot of positive things to say about the film. I think a lot of it works well. My question with that sequence was, does this movie earn it? Do we need 3-4 minutes of just constant footage of these kangaroos getting shot? And I don't know that we have to see that to get the ideas of the movie across. And that, especially that night scene, I think there's a way to shoot that scene without actually showing the deaths of the kangaroos. I don't know.
I'm definitely sure there is.
Give it some style.
And when the actors got involved, when they were wrestling with the kangaroos, obviously I think that looked pretty real to me. And like, he's the one guy, he slit the kangaroo's throat, and I was just like, what? I was like, you can't, like, and now I don't know if that part actually happened. I don't think it really did.
I don't think, when it's the actor's face, I don't think they're really killing the animals there.
Yeah, I hope not. Unless that actor was just like, I don't really care. But like, that was brutal. I think that was, I was just like, it's like they were treating it like it was a person. Because I don't really know. I've never been hunting a day in my life, but I was like, do people just go and like slit throats of animals? Is that like a thing that they hunt? Like, is that a hunting method? I don't know. It was very human to me, and that was horrible. Oh, that was awful.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that scene a little bit more. I have a few more pieces of trivia to share before we go into our just general thoughts on the movie. So alongside Walkabout, a movie I mentioned earlier, this was one of 2 Australian films to be nominated for the Grand Prix de Festival at the 24th Cannes Film Festival in 1971. Despite attracting positive reviews at the time, the film was a commercial failure in Australia, in part due to scant marketing by United Artists, as well as controversies surrounding its portrayal of outback life, including the controversial hunting scene. The film was titled Outback for its US release, a title that director Kotcheff hated. He said it sounded like an animal documentary.
Yeah.
And they
Outback
said, well, we
Steakhouse.
can't call it Wake in Fright. Nobody knows what that means. It sounds too much like a Hitchcock movie. And Kotcheff said, well, what's wrong with that? Give it the Hitchcock title. Yeah, so here's what happened with this movie. So it did get a release in Australia, in the United States in 71. Then the film, in the 70s, we didn't have home video yet, right? Movies that failed hard in the 70s, a lot of them would like go out of circulation and they'd be really hard to find. So this went out of circulation in large part due to the dissolution of the two production companies that made the movie. This is not like a universal release, right? If it was like a major studio, that'd be different. But it's like NLT Productions and Group W. Those are the two production companies that made the movie, and they both like went away. So when the movie's a failure, the two production companies dissolve. They're no longer a thing. It's like, well, where does the movie go? It goes to a warehouse, right? So the original film and sound elements went missing, sparking an international search. After a decade-long quest, in 2002, Wake in Fright's editor, Anthony Buckley, found the movie at an archive in Pittsburgh at CBS Iron Mountain. He found 60 cans of film in a shipping container marked for destruction. So he said, I read he said about a week later they were to destroy it. Like when he found it, like they were almost about to destroy it. It would have been gone. Like this movie would not exist. That was the only place anyone ever found it.
Wow.
So by September of 2004, a further 263 cans, several of which contained the original camera negative, were recovered from vaults, allowing for a full digital restoration. I mean, we did a bonus episode recently about Citizen Kane and how people tried to kill that movie in 1941 and almost managed to do that. I mean, it's crazy to think some of these films, love it or hate it, I think you make a film, like I think it should last. It should be available to view, whether you like it or don't. And this was the case of a movie that almost disappeared. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, there's a lot of really great craft and technique in this movie, really great performances. I disagree with some of the stuff with the kangaroos, but I do believe that this movie deserves to be seen. So that's a good thing. So in 2009, there was a re-release of this movie at Cannes and in Australian theaters to widespread acclaim. It was issued commercially on DVD and Blu-ray later that year. Roger Ebert reviewed the movie Halloween 2012, just a few months before he passed away. He gave it 3.5 stars, called it raw and uncompromised. It's now considered a pivotal film of the Australian New Wave, earning praise from contemporary critics for the direction and the performances. It was later remade as a 2-part miniseries in 2017.
Oh.
Which I looked up briefly. I didn't recognize any of the cast. I don't know how faithful it is to the 71 version, but there is a remake. We talk about remakes all the time on this podcast. Like, what would the movie look like 50 years later? Here's a case of one. I didn't get a chance to look at it, but here's a case. There is a recent remake. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, so what did you make of all of that? I mean, the fact that the editor of his own movie had to spend 10 years trying to track it down. He talked about, he went all over. He went to Europe. He heard, oh, it might be in this warehouse somewhere in Europe. Wow. And they did, and it wasn't there. So I'm like, how did he find it in Pittsburgh in this place in a box that said for destruction? Was he just looking in every box?
Like that's, well, I mean, just like a thought of like they would just destroy it is just like, that's
in the fire.
Well, and they're going to burn it down. Like that's, like it reminds me, we talked about it a little bit before, the American Horror Stories that just that's airing now.
Yeah,
the third episode is about a film called Rabbit.
Okay.
And in that film, they had one premiere night, and the way the movie had been created, and the way the film, like the sounds and everything, it triggered people to go crazy. So that's the story. Is that this movie triggered people to go crazy. So people, like 12 people watching this movie all went insane, started killing each other.
Oh, and that's a cool premise.
It's so far the best one, I think. And they all go crazy and like all this stuff. And then the film is lost for, I guess, maybe 30 years. and they're not showing it anymore. It's hidden. No one can find it. The original director of the movie is like, I'm going to release it again. We're going to have a one night screening of this movie that apparently made people go crazy. So of course, like all the kids are like, oh, we're totally going to watch this. And, it's just a myth. It's no big deal. And it's the only original reel they have left. And
they go crazy again.
And yeah, in a drive-in, everyone goes crazy. All start killing each other. Like, like the main couple, they're trying to like escape it. But they also learn the guy was going through the film. He's kind of like a film nerd, and he sees it's not the original film because he burns that one that he has already, and he tracks down where the director lives, goes to him, and they basically like hold him hostage. They're like, show us where the original film is because you're going to air this again, because there's supposed to be a double screening. And eventually, there's a yelling, and then he, eventually gives it to him. They burn it down, whatever. And then they burn down his trailer he lived in, and the guy dies. The director dies. Fast forward to like a couple of days later, the movie is released on Netflix.
Okay, so everybody in the world.
and then total major spoilers. Like, sorry for people listening to this, but then they show it's released on Netflix, and they kind of pan to the outside world, and like things are exploding, people are like shooting, going crazy. So basically the whole world goes crazy over this film because of the content in it. But it's so funny that like, the concept of it was the movie was hidden and gone for 30 years, and then they're like, oh, we're gonna bring it back. And it just made me think of that.
So if they just destroyed it in those 30 years, we would have been fine. People would have been safe.
Oh yeah, totally fine. Yeah. So maybe, luckily we did not go crazy after seeing this.
But movie. It is sad. Some movies go missing. Probably the most famous one is the last 40 minutes of Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons from 1942. I guess it screened a few times. It was supposed to be really stellar. And then he left for, I think, Cuba or somewhere to make a documentary. And then the studio grabbed his movie and said, we don't like the last third. They just like cut the whole thing out and added a new ending without Orson Welles even knowing about it. And by the time things got settled, I think the footage was gone. And there are people to this day in 2021 who are still actively around the world trying to find that missing footage, because from the very few people who got to see it in test screenings, like there's some really great stuff in the last 45 minutes that nobody's really seen. Wow. So there's that. And then Hitchcock, my favorite director, his second movie, The Mountain Eagle, is a lost film. Like I don't think there's any prints left. So there are movies that just go missing and then we never see them again. And so I'm happy that Wake in Fright is not one of those films. I'm happy that it got a restoration. And you watch that video of the director talking about it. Like, he makes this movie in 1970. It bombs, after Cannes, it basically disappears. He goes on with his career. And then, almost 40 years later, there he is at the premiere of the movie again at Cannes in 2009. And it's like just a huge, standing ovation. Everybody loves it. It goes on to like a lot of fanfare. And he's like, I thought this movie was dead 40 years ago. And here it is back. And he was like in his 80s at the time. I'm like, wow, that's cool. That's a cool story.
Yeah, it's basically, I wonder, if the fact that it was gone for 30 years, that if that's what made it so much more impactful now, the fact that it was gone and now it's back, and you're like, oh, because that if I had heard that the film had been lost for 30 years, was found again, and now I get to watch it, I would totally want to go watch. I was like, it just creates the story. I'm like, oh, like why? To me, I'm like, oh, why was it lost? And you're about to see something that hasn't been seen in 30 years. My curiosity and I'm very nosy. I'm like, I want to see what this is about now, and that would totally push me to go see a movie if I knew it had been gone for so long. I mean, I was interested in seeing this anyway, but like, had I known that before, I would have been like, I'm gonna take a day off work.
Had you heard of this movie before?
I had not at all. I feel like I saw a screen grab of it because the lead, Grant, that's his last name, Grant, right? Yeah, so Grant, he looked very familiar. I feel like I recognize his face, and possibly, honestly, I think it was probably Tumblr, let's be honest. Because I've seen his face before. And because he has very dark eyes, that's what really got me. His eyes almost like black. And I definitely remember his face, you know, because I guess like, you know, the homosexual themes, that's why it would be on Tumblr, obviously. Uh, and I think I've seen things of him. Also, my brother is such a huge fan of Donald Pleasence that I feel like I did some searching of him just to figure stuff out, and then I came
Mhm.
across it because yeah, it did. It felt like it was like a memory I had in my head. I was like, was this a fever dream or a memory? I can't quite remember. Uh,
Okay. I
yeah,
saw it on, it was, do you know of Shudder, the horror streaming
yeah,
service?
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
I saw it, like I just saw the image on it last year and it said 1971 Donald Pleasance. I went, ooh, I might look at that for maybe doing it for the podcast in 21. And then I started reading up on it and I went, oh yeah. So like this one was kind of on the cusp. I was like, you know, will anyone know what this movie is like? But I think it does have its fans, and especially as we get closer to October and Halloween, I wanted to
yeah.
touch on at least two or three kind of famous horror films from 71. And this
Oh
is
yeah.
definitely, I would say, probably next to maybe Let's Scare Jessica to Death, which is an episode that will have dropped by now. It's one of the top two or three, probably most famous horror films from 71 is this one.
Okay.
So yeah, so once I started reading up on it and how it was a lost film, I was like, ooh, this
Oh
is
yeah.
interesting. I want to talk about this.
Very intriguing.
All right, so that takes us to what was our just overall take opinion on the movie? You know, beyond the kangaroo hunting scene, just as a movie from beginning to end, what did you make of this?
I mean, I was definitely. I mean, it had a slow build up,
Mm-hmm.
but um, one, I've never seen many films that take place in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think Kangaroo Jack. That's all I can think about. I was like when I was a kid. I was like with Jack O'Connell, I think, and I was just like, yeah, like, and uh, from Blackish Anthony, I forget his name. Great actor. I just can't think of his name now. But that's the only thing I'm like, oh yeah, Kangaroo Jack with a kangaroo with a hoodie on with the money. Like that's all I think of. So I was happy to get to see, you know, more of Australia. And now that it made me I was very uncomfortable during the entire movie because one, it's extremely hot. And everyone's so sweaty and it's so
Sweaty.
dry. And I'm just like, I feel so gross right
Yeah.
now. And one of my favorite things, I love when movies, especially horror movies, when they incorporate Christmas in it. I love Christmas very much and I love horror movies. So when they're like somehow like strung together, it's just like my favorite thing. Now Black Christmas I absolutely hate because it's a bad movie. But I
The
love
original?
I've never seen the original, I'm not gonna lie. I've
Okay, the
seen I think
original's good.
both.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah, I think I need to watch that because I watched the remakes and they were just so
Yeah,
bad.
don't
Uh,
bother with the remake.
I don't. I never want to see that ever again. But like Conjuring 2, they had like, some Christmas vibes, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I love the Christmas. Uh, and like all this crazy stuff is happening. They're like, oh, there's a little Christmas tree in the background. I'm like, this is bizarre. Uh, Also
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they're going on summer vacation and it's Christmas time. I'm like, oh yeah, that's how things work.
Yeah,
And
it's
now that,
tricky.
yeah.
It's tricky in that I don't really consider this one a Christmas movie, even though it's set around the holiday, because it's just so un-Christmas like with its setting
Very
and
unchristmassy.
the warm temperature and the sweat. And we get like a Christmas tree. We get that guy. There's a guy who's singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Mm-hmm.
so
Yep.
there. So I guess if you had to make a list of Christmas horror films, I guess you could put this one on it. But
Add this
it's
one on
not
it.
quite the same as
Not too
most
Christmassy.
other Christmas themed horror films. Like
I
it
think
is
because
just
I
like
have
in the
a thing for
background.
it. Yeah, I think I just have a thing for it, and I was like,
I
oh,
do
I'm
too.
totally gonna like, I'm gonna have a back of my mind this is Christmas. But like the whole movie on its own, I mean, it definitely had me invested just
Hmm.
because I think because I did pick up on the homosexual vibes. And
Yes.
I just want to see how it played out because also I mean it was so like the men and then gambling and like I wanted to see where he was gonna go because one I was like, is he ever gonna make it to this girl he's trying to get to?
Yeah.
Like
This
I
this
totally thought
this
it was like maybe his
girl.
old wife, this mysterious, really hot woman that he's trying to get to.
Yeah.
Uh, and I I thought it was gonna be all about the gambling, and I thought it was gonna be him like having to get involved in like some shady money making stuff, but it really didn't really get into that. And I the scene with the woman at the hotel clerk when she's washing herself and she's being like all like seductive and just like rubbing water down her body, and he's just like, here's the key back, here's that, and I was like, oh, he's totally not into this. Like he just like, oh yeah. I was just like, I mean, I really wouldn't be into it either because it makes me, I mean, it could have been anyone. And I was like, oh, I'm too sweaty. I don't want to be touched. I don't like it. You all need to cool off. But then that really got me. I was like, oh, like, you know, you only see women only a handful of times. You see the little flashbacks of his, you know, lover, and the woman at the hotel clerk being all like sexy, and then Jeanette, that's her name, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Jeanette, the man's daughter at the house when they were hanging out, and you know, she obviously, I think, you know, she was also trying to seduce him in a way, and you know, of course,
she's really into him.
I mean, she's totally into it, takes him to the woods, and takes off her clothes, and
as one does.
He's just like, in the scene, the little tiny thing that I read about later on when he offers to help her clean dishes. That was instantly just like, oh, he's totally gay.
He's gay. He's gonna clean.
I was like, he's going, like, it's the 70s and he's gonna go help a woman clean dishes instead of drink beers with some friends. Like, oh yeah, totally gay. That's totally what I would do. Like,
there's kind of a gay bar vibe too. Like he gets, I feel like it happens more than once. Like a guy's like, hey, come on over, I'll buy you a drink, come sit with me.
Oh yeah,
let's talk.
Oh, and the sheriff kept on like giving him these like random glances, like just a moment of just like staring at each other. And I was like, oh my god. I was like, this sheriff, like, it's crazy. I love it. Was, and I definitely see where that went, you know, and you know, I definitely felt like this movie was going to have a major message to it, and I was waiting to see it, and it definitely came through.
And then we get at least one scene later on with Pleasence where I'm like, is something gonna happen between these two? We see Sam Loomis himself, Donald Pleasence, just like walking around this house with his shirt off, and he's kind of rubbing up against John, and I'm like,
he discusses sex to him.
Talks about like, sex.
He's like, at the end of the day, we're both, you know, we're just animals who need sex. He said something along those lines. And he was very close to him saying that, and I was like, there's basically no women in this movie. There's hundreds of men. I was like, of course. I was just like, oh my god, like Donald Pleasence. I was just like, are they gonna like have sex? And you know, it looks like they kind of do. It's not shown.
we cut away, but I'm like,
got away, but
okay.
When he started describing, you know, we're just, you know, we're both sexual beings. He talking about Jeanette, and I was just like, oh, they're totally into him. So it was all kinds of interesting stuff in that movie.
And ideas of like masculinity, like that's what I kind of took the kangaroo hunting scene to be. They're like kind of pimping him, like, okay, you're next, go fight the kangaroo, and he's into it. Like he's not like, you know, cowering in the corner like, you know, that guy in Saving Private Ryan. Like he's like, John is like full on smile on his face shooting at these things, but you get the sense that he's trying to prove something, like proving that he's straight or something like that. That's how I read that stuff.
And that's totally understandable as well, because like, I mean, as a gay man, I'm just like, oh, I totally get this message of like, you know, having to fit in or go along with a conversation with a group of straight men before I was out. And I was just like, oh yeah, like I remember, you know, being in high school or middle school and having to kind of like, fake these things or play along with something, or like, I'll be like, oh yeah, she's so hot, you're so right. In my head, I'm like, I don't want to talk about her in this way. Like, this is not right. And, and I mean, that's totally a vibe it gave. For me now, I think it's more so hindsight. Like, of course, I got the whole, like, you know, the vibes, and then the I thought the whole killing of the kangaroos was much more about masculinity. I didn't really very much associate it with like heterosexuals and like men. But then after, thinking about it later on, I was like, oh yeah, like, he's not doing this because he thinks he's like a weak man. He's doing it because he thinks, oh, that's what a straight man would do. This is what I need to do in order to survive this awful little town. What's the town called again? It was an odd name.
The Yaba.
The Yaba.
It was, well, that's what, that was the nickname for it. It was like a much longer name. It's like Yaba, blah, 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 blah. It's like something more than that, but they call it the Yaba.
Yes, and it is it's a fictional place. So
yeah,
I was like, I don't want to be disrespectful like with the name, but I was like, oh, it's fictional, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think one of the best things about this movie is the setting, where it's set, like the Australian like everything outside, and that beautiful opening shot. It like does a full 360-degree pan of the smallest school I've ever seen.
Oh my god! And like, where do those kids go, by the way?
Yeah, so we're introduced to this guy. He's a school teacher, and he doesn't want to be there. I think like it's like a government thing. Like he took this job, and they can basically decide what they want to do with him, and so he ends up teaching this one class of. I mean, we have a camera pan across the students, and it's like young to old. It's like there's like some kids like really young, and then we get to like what 17, 18 even maybe like they're older, and it's all in this little schoolhouse. And it's the last day of school before winter break, and they leave. And then we see the teacher, John, walk outside, and it's just like a desert landscape of nothing. I'm like, where do these kids live? Like, where are they going?
Funny. Part of me thought like, oh, is this a trick? It's like, oh, do they? I was like, is this all in his head? Just for a minute, just because I just like to overthink things. I'm just like, he's in the middle of nowhere, and like all these kids are suddenly gone. And it's like, where the hell did they go? And I was like, oh, maybe that's it. Maybe it's like a weird like vibe kind of thing. I was like, maybe not.
Maybe they don't exist.
Maybe I always thought maybe they don't exist.
He was teaching an empty room.
He's crazy.
Yeah, this movie did have enough of that. I'm like, oh, is the twist going to be in the last act? Like he is going mentally insane? Like, is he seeing things? Is Donald Pleasence not real? Like, is he, I was like, maybe it'll go there. It doesn't. But you're always wondering, especially when something's called a horror film and an hour in, there's not really any horror. And you're like, where is this going to be more of a psychological mind thing? Like, so that was something I was thinking about too. So yeah, I like the setting. I thought the performances were really strong. I just liked the vibe of the place that Ketchup. I keep forgetting it. I'll call him Ketchup. Kotcheff. Director Kotcheff. He really does create this really intriguing place here. Not just like the exteriors of Australia, but just like the bars and the sweaty hotel room and it's a sense of place here you don't necessarily get in a lot of movies, good or bad. You really feel it in this one. Like, I think if this has been shot in LA, it wouldn't have the same feel. Like, I think you need it to be shot in this place, and it does add something to the movie that you couldn't get anywhere else.
Yeah, and I feel like the whole movie, everything just made me uncomfortable. Like, not like just I was just horribly uncomfortable. Like, not like. And even the thing of the character, like he is now in this little town. We'll just start off. He's teaching at this school. Like he's at this school that like he's kind of forced to be there. So he's already out of his element from there. Then he goes to this, and when he's on the train, all the guys are hanging out, but he always sits by himself. He's really engaged with them. And
want a beer?
Want a beer. And it happened again at the end of the movie, like bookends. And he goes to this town, and again, like and now all of a sudden he went from there's nobody to like there are so many people huddled around him in this gambling hall, and now it's just like gross and sweaty, and like there's his privacy is now gone. And then he goes to the hotel room. She's the clerk is all weird, she's all inappropriate, and ends up at the man's house from the bar, and he's like, I don't really know them. I don't want to hang out with them, so I'm gonna go talk to Jeanette. And then he's end up in this shack, and it's just like he keeps ending up in places that he really doesn't want to be, but he also isn't like trying too hard to escape it.
This is not a character. It's not like every second he's trying to get out. He's just kind of just like goes, okay, I guess I'm gonna stay here for another week. It's like, okay.
He's definitely just like he's like couch hopping, and
Yeah.
it's it makes me uncomfortable because he's just like stranger danger, dude. Like, come on.
Oh, this is definitely a movie that makes you uncomfortable. There's a great sense of isolation throughout the movie. Like, you feel like he's just, even when he's with the men on the hunt, and like you feel like the sense of isolation. Like, he doesn't have anyone he can really turn to.
Yeah, he does not want to be there.
It's like that element is done really well. Craft tech, I like that, like there's more handheld as the movie goes along. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah,
with the tension. I thought the score was really great, kind of funky, kind of unusual, but definitely had a couple moments that where it creeped me out a little bit. Like the score was really solid too.
mm-hmm.
Any other like craft elements or anything the director did in the movie beyond inserting footage of real animals?
I mean, it was very, very trippy. And you know, the it was, you know, I think it was right when he was, I mean, spoiler alert, I guess, he was going to commit suicide in the end, or was kind of toying with the idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the dramatic flashes of this, like, this woman that, you know, does she even exist? This woman in the bikini.
Yeah, on the beach.
And I believe she was the one who was then like making out with Donald Pleasence.
Oh my God, there is a shot of Donald Pleasence like kissing a woman with like tongue. And I'm like,
yeah,
whoa, what?
Like and it's flashing to that. And then the scene when the little coins go on his eyes, that freaked me out because that is just an awful, like, it's creepy because it just makes that's what they did, you know, when people would die, you know, back in the olden days, they put little coins on their eyes. And I believe, is that like I think that's like their payment into like the afterlife. I think that's what the whole theme with that was.
Yeah.
Also, Annabelle Comes Home. Those are characters in that movie, where they're dead people who walk around with little coins on their eyes, and they were terrifying. So that part just freaked me out. I was like, stop, like, no. And the whole moment when he was going to kill himself, he was having all these dramatic flashes of like flashbacks, but also like, you know, these situations that didn't happen. It was obviously after the time where he and Doc supposedly had sex, and now he's picturing, I think that was he's picturing that moment as if it's that woman having sex with him, as if maybe that's how it should have been. It should have been him having sex with her, not, you know, him having sex with him. And I really liked it because at first most of it was, you know, it was very I guess chronological, and it just kind of, you know, everything was flowing, and then all of a sudden, he brought in this element of these things that didn't actually happen are now flashing, and you know, it's, you know, messing with his memory and messing with us. We're like, wait, so what actually did happen? At least that's how I thought. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but this is really messed up.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot of style in this movie, but there are at least one or two moments where we do get like cool, like editing flashes that kind of brings you into the mind of the main character and how like he's going a little crazy and suppressing his sexuality, and he's thinking about maybe even shooting and killing Doc, right, when he goes in at the end. And so we get those flashes of of Doc, and I'm like, whoa, I have not seen Sam Loomis in this kind of way before. I don't know, but like there are some actors, Andrew, like Donald Pleasence, like he's Sam Loomis in Halloween. That's how I see him as Blofeld in James Bond and in The Great Escape, which is great. At I can kind of, but like, you know, especially in this movie, we're 7 years away from Halloween, so he's starting to look older, a little bit more like Loomis. So it's just like really weird to see that actor not playing a very just grounded, very simple, stoic, like, I have one mission in life to he's
very silly,
hunt Michael down.
He's a very silly guy in it. Like it was great seeing him like this. Almost like, oh, I have like, you know, so much respect for him even more as an actor, because I was like, like he's very versatile. And I mean, I grew up only seen him in Halloween and Halloween 2 and 4
Halloween
and 5
4.
and 6. And he always, he was always that same character. So I think this is probably my first movie I've ever seen him as, in a different movie. And I loved it. I was like, oh, like he's very good. Oh, he's so expressive. His face is so unbelievably expressive. Whenever he widens his eyes, like does that kind of stuff. I'm just like, oh, like chills, 100%. I'm just like, he is nutty, like, but in a very uncomfortable way.
He is, Donald Pleasence is superb in this. I loved watching every moment of him, just like him walking around the house with the shirt off. And it doesn't John at one point ask, like, is there a bathroom? And he's like, outside, my friend, anywhere you'd like to go.
Yeah. Oh, and then he goes and he's like, no, just pee outside, who cares? And then he goes and talks to him while he's peeing, and he's like, hey man, like, what are you doing? It's like, give him some privacy. Like, damn.
Yeah.
Like, dude.
Oh, and one other thing we have to mention, there is so much eating and drinking alcohol in this movie.
Oh my God.
Like, Donald Pleasence is just always shoveling in food. There's like 4 scenes where he's just chomping down, and there's just constant beer flowing. He's drinking, he's halfway down and they're already planting the next glass in front. It's like, Jesus, take a breath.
Yes. Well, and I know, like, he had mentioned, he's a doctor and he practices medicine in this town, but he doesn't accept money. He accepts beer and food and a place to like kind of crash. So he's like a very intelligent man, and he knows what he's doing. He says, he's like, I'm an alcoholic and they won't let me practice it like in the city, so I can just be an alcoholic out here and people still come to me for advice. Now, of course, I don't agree with that. I don't want an alcoholic, or at least a non-recovering alcoholic doctor, because that's just all kinds of unsafe. But it was interesting, and seeing him like in the suit in the end, I was like, oh my God, like he's finally had the shirt on. He hadn't had a shirt on like the entire movie. He always had like like a wife beater on. And then he comes in, he's wearing his suit, and he's just like, it was odd. It was like he got reset as the John. I was like, at the end of the movie, it's like they both got reset, and now they're kind of like back. Like now that they're in the city, they're like, oh, like we got to be all ourselves again. It was almost like a weird vacation. It's like it was a weird vacation for him, and I want to know how long Donald Pleasence's character had been in that town. Wasn't like, had he only been there for a short while, or had he been there for like many years? Like, it's not really told how long he had been there. Because he's still living in some guy's shack, and it's like, well, he's living in this guy's shack. I was like, I feel like he would have maybe wanted to leave by then. So he could have been doing the same thing as John. It's like he got stuck there and he got seducted by the craziness, and he couldn't leave.
Well, doesn't he say at one point, you don't have to have any money to live here? Like, you can just survive off of no money.
And that he exchanges his doctor expertise on that. And on just food and beer. Oh my God! And John can chug a beer. Jesus. Like,
3 gulps.
Watching his like throat, he's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. I was like, that makes me want to vomit. I could never. It takes me an hour to drink one beer. I'm not a beer drinker, so
I can't. My brother can go crazy. I can't really chug beer.
I cannot. Give me a shot, I'll be fine.
I can do a shot, beer, but like beer, I'll get a stomach ache if I chug a beer.
I was like, beer, Pepto-Bismol, beer, Pepto-Bismol, and just like back and forth. I can't. That was overwhelming, because also I'm not a very heavy drinker. I only drink like maybe once a month or so, and just like seeing the excessive drinking that much, I was like, oh my God. I was like, how are y'all still alive? Like
you have this thing called a liver.
And
I wouldn't trust the doctor around these parts. Like, what's going to happen if you get sick?
Exactly. It's just like, and when and also that fighting scene was very intense. Because one, it looked like the actors were actually doing their own stunts. Because like they were getting thrown off porches, and I was like, that looks like Donald Pleasence being thrown off a porch. And it was there was just so much anger and like frustration. I mean, I'm sure, Donald Pleasance, he's much older man. And if he is, homosexual, then I'm sure he has way more, just so much frustration with, suppressing his sexuality. And do we? I'm sure we want to talk about that scene as well.
You're talking about the character, right? Not Donald
the
Pleasance.
Character, yes,
okay.
not Donald Pleasance.
I don't think he was. I don't think he was gay.
Doc. I'm gonna call him Doc.
Yeah, Doc.
That's what Doc. It makes it more clear. But yeah, that scene with Doc and John.
Yeah. Where it cuts to black.
Swinging. Yeah. Because they were like playing around, and he pinned him down. They gave him that look, and I was like, oh,
here we go.
I was waiting for the kiss, and I mean, I'm sure it did.
Yeah,
happen.
it almost like you think they're going to kiss. Like they're not going to show anything, but like they might kiss, but we cut away before any of that happened.
Nope, they cut, and then they wake up on the floor, and then John has to buckle his pants back together the next morning. So I was like, oh yeah. I was like, they banged.
So
100%.
yeah, I think the director made it subtle enough that like a straight audience member could watch the movie and not even go there, like not even think about it. But if you're gay, like you're watching this, you're like, okay, there's something going on here.
I was like, listen, wrestling is a thing that people do. Okay.
Yeah.
That was insane.
Yeah, and then Gary Bond in the lead role. I mean, he's not like the greatest actor who ever lived. He's very handsome. He has some charisma. He's an interesting figure, someone I've never seen before. It's always exciting to watch a movie where the lead actor is someone I don't really recognize and don't know very well. I think if there's a weakness in the movie outside of the kangaroo hunting scene that I didn't like so much, it's like I'm all for the slow burn, but there are stretches of this movie where it's drifting very slowly, and all we really have is him, and he's solid in the movie, but he's not necessarily an actor I'm like gravitating to his every gesture, his every move. I'm much more, for me, that's more Donald Pleasance. That's the actor I love just watching 100%. Everything. Like there's like a good 30 minutes of the movie. Like I really love the opening 20 to 30 minutes, but then there's like this section where, especially the gambling stuff, I think that goes on too long, and there is a section I felt like, okay, we could hurry it up a little bit here. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I totally agree. Cause the opening, it definitely got me interested in like, where, the environment was just very, just very secluded. And I really didn't see where he was wanting to go. And things got very repetitive for sure. Like, the gambling, just kind of going back and forth. And, some of it was very, I guess, predictable as well. I was like, he's totally going to get into this gambling thing, obviously.
Yeah.
And, I think, that was kind of okay to, for that to be predictable. Now, the kangaroo hunting thing, that just came out of nowhere.
Yeah, there's no setup for it, really.
No, not at all. I mean, they just brought it in, and I was like, oh, I thought the movie was going to be focused on his gambling issue and drinking and like trying to get his money back, and now he can't get back to where he needs to go. I thought that's where the movie was going to go with this, but it definitely, me and Donald Pleasance, then me and Doc, and it just like flipped it all out. I'm like, okay, never mind. Now we're going to go on this crazy adventure. Crazy violence adventure.
Yeah, there is a weird stylistic shift. Like when we go on the hunts, like there's a lot more energy, there's more camera movement there. It's almost like a different looking movie than we've had for like the first hour or more, or whatever it is. That also threw me off a little too. It was like, and it's almost like the director's shooting it in a way to make it really exciting, and that felt wrong to me. As we're seeing animals get hunted and killed, I was like, this should not, I felt like it should, if we're going to see this, it should be not shot in a way where it's like exciting adventure. I don't know. Like I was like, no. And then we go to the night stuff, and I'm like, I got it. Like, we don't need to see 5 minutes of this. Like, this is too much.
And it was constantly just like kangaroo throw there. Kangaroo there. I'm like, okay. Like,
I just don't know if the movie like earned that stuff. I don't think it had to show that much violence towards the animals for the audience to get it. Like, I was like, okay, so, like a few flashes of that would have been shocking and would have been enough. But this, I wrote my notes. This is the first movie I've watched for the podcast that made me ill, that made me feel sick.
Yeah.
Because I didn't look away. I don't look. Yeah, I was like watching the thing. I'm like, I'm gonna watch it, Brian. One time, you're watching this sequence. Okay, it's very controversial, famous thing. And it made me physically ill for at least an hour after I watched that sequence. And I'm like, did the movie earn the right to do that? And I don't think this one does. So that was my kind of big issue with it.
I sort of agree with that. I think that was such a shocking like gut punch, but thinking of, I mean, like the movie I'm gonna compare a movie later, but like thinking of Hereditary,
right?
With that gut punch of what happened, that movie totally earned it because I was like, there was so much prior before that, and just the aftermath, and also it happened so early on in the movie, that there was so much follow up with it, where you're okay with it because of where it leads after that. The kangaroo killing stuff, it does. I mean, it happened so much later in the movie that, and like nothing had happened too much before that. Like it, I feel like it could have been maybe placed differently in the movie.
Integrated into the plot earlier. Maybe there could have been a scene in the first 20 minutes where he has not a showdown with a kangaroo, but there's like some sort of connection. Or I felt like there needed to be some sort of like planting in the first 30 minutes to set us up for that part. It just came out,
absolutely.
Like it just came out of nowhere. It was weird. I just it didn't gel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beyond seeing the real footage. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people really are just wowed and disturbed and by it in a really positive way. It did not sit well with me. But overall, I would still give the movie like 3 out of 4 stars. It was worth seeing once. I'll probably never watch it again because of that sequence. I'll never watch it again. Oh. I'm very happy to have seen this Donald Pleasence performance. That's what his performance is, my takeaway here, and what I'll be thinking about when I think about this movie. So my last question about the movie, Andrew, is, there is a remake in 2017. I would be curious to see. I'm hoping there's not real animal slaughter.
Very interested. Yeah.
In the 2017.
Me too.
But like, so neither of us has seen it. Like, if they were to remake this as a 2-hour movie in 2021, like what do you think would be similar? What would be different if they got like, let's say they got like a good, really big star for the lead role, and they went to Australia and they made this movie again? Like, what would be different? What would be similar? Would the homosexual subtext be more of a thing? Would we get to see the kiss?
I think, we'll definitely see the kiss. I think audiences are more understanding now. I think we'll see. I want to see him have more interactions with women.
Okay.
I think that would just be it. I think it would help clarify, I guess, his sexuality. Because at first, when he threw up after making out with Jeanette for a bit, I understood it like, oh, he just drank too much and he got sick. And
right. You could read it that way.
I read it that way. So I think now there would be more of a hint of this, like, oh, he's just like disgusted with the idea. I feel like that if they had more build up with like maybe more so going into his mind and not making everything so subtle, I think I feel like today so many great films do deal with homosexuality, and it could be an interesting idea to like display it. They made it, almost like living a suppressed, living in the closet is a horror movie. Like that's right. Kind of the vibe. And I don't know, I feel like they could just, maybe be a little more obvious with it. And I think the setting might be a little harder. I'm not thinking about how the setting would be like. I feel like there's not many gambling halls like that anymore.
I feel like if he's like a closeted homosexual in a 2021 version that is set today, I don't know how that would work very well. Like especially like I feel like in some ways it'd have to be set in the past. Like it's actually set in 2021. I don't know if that would come through as well. Yeah.
I feel like the animal violence wouldn't have happened. I feel like it would more, I think had that scene been redone today, it would be him with probably a group of straight men, maybe picking around on like a gay guy probably.
Oh, okay.
Or making it to where now, John would be possibly beating up a man that's gay, and they're beating him because he's gay, even though he is, himself, he is gay himself. And there's a lot of there's probably gonna be a lot of self-hate involved. And I think that's how they would kind of spin it this time. Would be him beating up an actual person and doing horrible violent things to them just to try to hide his sexuality, because I know there are plenty of men who have done that before, I'm sure. Where they tease other gay men, they make fun of them, they do it because that's how they are. I mean, in Glee, that's what they did. The bullies the gay kid because he himself is gay. And now that's also been done a lot, and I really don't like, where I don't like the idea too much of a man being violent towards another man because of his homosexuality. I feel like that it's not an excuse in my mind. Like, you did a horrible thing, and hopefully he'll come to understand it, and be like, and maybe he gets to go to apologize to him later and be like, oh my God, this is what I did. I hurt you so innocently. You were so innocent, and I, did a violent act towards you. And I would like for him to be able to, one, own up to the fact that he did it. Because the kangaroo that John killed in this original one he said was a baby. It was a baby kangaroo, super innocent, had nothing. He didn't know what he was doing. And he had so much regret towards killing him in the end, which is probably why he wanted to go kill Doc. So maybe I would like it to where, if this was a remake, he beat up a guy, he felt horrible about it, he went back and explained it and apologized, and at least got some kind of closure with himself and with that guy, just to help him. And of course, take full ownership of it. I don't want him to feel like, I was going through a bad time, that's why I did something violent. Like, own up to it, but also like, I don't want it to be an excuse for violence. So I think that would be an interesting
I would love to see what a gay filmmaker could do with this material. Like, and really I think that would be the interesting way to go now, to really play that up and not like keep it suppressed like in this version. Like, I would like to see something like that. I think there's one of two ways you go. You make it more of just a drama about that subject, right? Or you make it like a horror. Hold on. God, this is quite the morning. Now I have people calling me. I think you either make it like a full-on drama about the subject, or you amp up the horror more and make it more psychological and more intense from the beginning. Because I feel like the first hour of the movie, it's just a drama. Like, there's not a whole lot, and there's not really a lot of horror in this film. It's more of like the effect it has on you makes it kind of horror. So I think it's, you either go in one or the other direction. I don't think, like, finding that middle ground in a newer version, I don't think would land as well. So there's like two different versions you can make out of it, really, and that either one could be interesting.
Absolutely, I think it could definitely go either way. Because I mean, I think this could definitely be more so a drama that has a more clear message. I think that. But
I like, I like the circular nature of the story. We didn't talk about the very end. Like, he goes back to the schoolhouse at the very end. And doesn't the guy say, like, so how was your vacation?
He's like, oh, it was great.
So I'm like, how long was this break he had? Just a couple of weeks?
or was it a super long time? Because I was like, oh, if he's already going back to school, I was like, no, their summer break has to be at least a month or two. I mean,
well, it's winter break, right? Because they leave right before Christmas.
So
I thought it was like winter break. They'll come back in January for the next term. Is that not what it was supposed to be?
I swore, because they said summer break.
They did? Am I just completely stupid? Is Christmas celebrated in June in Australia?
No, I think here's the thing. I don't know. just
They were
know
singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That was
yes, they
December,
were.
right?
It was December, but I believe, but
But
their
their
summer is
summer
in
break
December.
is in their winter because of the
Yes.
weather.
Yes.
Because in Australia in December, January, it's at its hottest. So it might be
Yeah.
longer than what we think of as a 2 or 3 week winter break. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's Australia, you know.
I've never been. I haven't read up enough on Australia, so our Australian listeners are just beating their heads against the wall right now.
Yeah, they're like, no, these morons.
Oh my God. So I'm glad I watched it. As I said before, probably won't ever watch this again, but there were some interesting things about it. I like seeing it this once, and especially Pleasence's performance. And considering that Gary Bond never made another movie after this, I'll probably never see him again in a project. So I'm glad that there was at least this, and that his performance in this movie was not lost forever. The cans of this movie marked for destruction. I'm happy that his performance gets to be seen by everybody. So that's really cool.
Absolutely.
All right. So that takes us to our final 2 segments. The first one's called the Divine Double Feature. What movie would you pick? A more modern movie would you pick to be paired with Wake in Fright? What did you go with on that one?
Okay. So at the beginning, the movie I had picked out, it kind of changed over after a while. One of them was Silver Linings Playbook.
Oh, okay. Good film.
And the reason, love it. So good. Partly because that movie also stresses me the hell out. Because, also I find both of the characters are male teachers, which is one first thing I thought of. It was like, they're both male teachers, which I feel like is not that common to have have a male teacher who teaches younger kids. It's usually always like a professor or something, like in college. And I've always found that that's always an interesting. A male teacher teaching young kids to me has always just been an interesting thought in my head. Not like in a bad way. I don't see it often, and I'm not exposed to it very often. And the issue in the gambling issue with his father gambling away, with Bradley Cooper's father. Oh my god. I know his name. Oh my gosh, I feel awful right now.
Robert De Niro?
Yes, Robert De Niro. I was saying Robert Downey Jr. Like, that's not right, Andrew. Come on. Robert De Niro and his horrible gambling issue.
Yeah.
Bradley Cooper trying to get to his wife back. He's trying to get to this woman. Instead of going on a physical journey, across, to a different city to go see her. If she's even real at this point, that woman was never even real. At least I don't think she was. That he's trying to emotionally get to a spot where he can be better for her. And the way she's always showing flashbacks. He's always thinking of her during moments where he needs to be. And that it gave me those vibes. And then Jeanette really gave me a Jennifer Lawrence movie, because she's very mysterious and sexy, and she's trying to seduce him in a way. And I mean, she obviously does. And it really gave me those. Also, because the movie also very much stressed me out, because he is he's different. He's a very angry. He's bipolar, and he's very angry, and he's trying to escape this craziness. That I don't want to say craziness. That's probably not right. He's trying to escape this anger and these issues that he has. To become a more calm person. Whereas vice versa, John in this movie, he's a very calm, put together man that dives into this wild nature. And I don't know, to me, they definitely gave me a same sense of just anxiety of this man on, they flip journeys in a way. So yeah, that was one. But then later on, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting Midsummer vibes from this movie too. Midsummer, just because you've seen Midsummer, I'm assuming.
I think it's pronounced Midsommar. I never know how to say it. I was calling it Midsummer for a while, and someone said it's Midsommar. I went, okay.
Yes, I think you're right. I think someone else corrected me on that once too.
That is my choice, Andrew.
Exactly. Midsommar.
Midsommar, yeah.
Because of that, oh my God. Well, first of all, she goes to this very secluded place surrounded by all
Yeah.
these people she doesn't
Mhm.
know. And the horrible, horrible scene to me when the two people commit suicide and they
Yeah.
all watch it and they're all totally okay with it. And they're like,
They're like, oh,
but
another
she's
day.
obviously not. And she eventually starts taking part in these crazy acts. And
Yeah.
she just feels like, well, she's out of place. She kind of has to do it. And yeah, Midsommar and that movie definitely had the same some of the same vibes to me as well. And I feel like I hadn't looked away from the screen during a scene since Midsommar, and
Yeah.
that this movie I looked away. I couldn't really watch it because it was just so brutal. And even though Midsommar's scene was fake, it felt unbelievably real and awful, and I couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
I looked away, and that this movie made me look away as well. I haven't done that in a very long time.
Yeah, we talked about Midsommar a little bit on our Let's Scare Jessica to Death episode. It's a movie that I've only seen once. I found it very disturbing. And unlike Ari Aster's other movie, Hereditary, that you mentioned earlier, like Hereditary, I've watched 3 or 4 times. I can watch that more than once. Like Midsommar, just it's long. It's like 2.5 hours long. And there's so much dread. And that last half hour just goes to some places. It just was really creepy. And yeah, I mean, talking about, Wake in Fright, it's hard to watch the kangaroo hunting scene. The scene that I always think about that is just like, it's like I had to look away was that scene at the end of Midsommar where those two guys are looking at each other kind of like lovingly almost as the place burns down until the flames start nipping at their backs and they start screaming. That was like, I was like, this is too much. And it's just so well done. And it's a great film. It would be a long 4.5 hours to watch Wake in Fright and Midsommar back to back. But that's the movie that I thought of while I was finishing Wake in Fright. So that would be my choice too.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's a good one. Oh, and just a real quick aside. Last night, I had a dream that I was watching Hereditary 2 and I was enjoying it.
Really? What was happening in that movie?
I don't remember. I just remember it was Toni Collette and her son, and they were like outside, and I was watching it going, oh, Ari Aster made a sequel. This is cool. And then I woke up and I'm like, what the hell? Ari Aster, you're never off my mind. I can't wait to see his next movie with Joaquin Phoenix coming soon. It's called Disappointments Boulevard, a weird title, but Joaquin Phoenix and Ari Aster, sign me up.
That's
gonna be good.
It's gonna be wild. Like I'm not ready for that. But yes, he's oh my God, he's so good.
Yeah, he's so talented.
Both of them are so good.
Yeah, and just the fact that he brought those two movies out like a year apart, it's just like, whoa, like two of like the finest works of horror like in the last 10 years, and they were by the same guy a year apart. Like, okay.
And I feel like, I mean, Hereditary is, I mean, that's the most talked about horror movie I've heard, I mean, in years.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
Like, of course, like Conjuring and the Insidious movie, like at least the first one, those were talked about like in very positive because they're just like good, fun, like enjoyable, scary movies. But Hereditary like messed people up.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that.
It's
That's
terrifying
awesome.
in a psychological way, but there are images at the last half hour. I mean, you can't forget.
You can't
like, it's like
and
Toni Collette sawing off her. I mean, it's like,
see, and that scene, I can't do it. I can't.
But for me, Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary, that's the best performance by a man or a woman, by anybody that was not nominated at the Academy Awards in a long time. Like, I'm like, how do you ignore that? I know it's a horror film. Those are tougher to get into the, Academy Award system and all of that. But I'm like, if Kathy Bates can win for Misery, I think Toni Collette deserved to be nominated. I don't know.
100%. It is a crime.
Yeah. All right. So that takes us to our final segment, Beyond the Flick, talking about the career of Donald Pleasence. If you look him up on IMDb, 240 credits, Andrew.
Insane.
240 credits. Your brother's favorite actor, one of his favorite actors, and he's seen 2 of his 240 film.
Yeah, I mean, hope he's not listening to this. I mean, love you, Kevin, but I was a little shocked by that. You got some work to do.
So he was acting in films, I want to say, as early as the 50s, maybe even the late 40s. I mean, it was like early on. And then he was acting all the way to his death. He died in February of 95. And after his death, I think he had like 3 or 4 more movies come out. Like, he was just like, he was a working actor all the way to the end. Character roles, just I don't think he was the lead of very much. I mean, maybe almost nothing. He was always like a supporting actor. He would probably show up for work for 5 days here, 8 days here. But
he's in career. It's like pops in and everything.
But he's in some great films. I know we'll talk about Halloween at the end because that's, of course, my favorite film that he's in. But he's in some great stuff. If you haven't seen Cul-de-sac, an early Roman Polanski movie, he's really great in that. You Only Live Twice, where he's the villain, Blofeld, very famous. Like basically what Dr. Evil is modeled after in the Austin Powers movies was the performance by Pleasence in You Only Live Twice, which I believe was the 5th James Bond movie, one of the last ones with Connery. And I also really love him in Prince of Darkness, another John Carpenter film. He worked with John Carpenter not only on Halloween, he's also in Prince of Darkness, which I haven't talked about in the podcast before, a really great 87 horror film by Carpenter. And then, of course, Escape from New York from 1981 with Kurt Russell. Donald Pleasence plays the president of the United States. And does a great job. He's not in a whole lot of it. But those are kind of my runners-up. In my top 3, Will Penny is a Western with Charlton Heston from 1968. He plays like a really vicious dude. Pleasence and Will Penny plays a really vicious dude, kind of the villain of the piece. And it's one of his most just like monstrous performances. And it's great. Like he's so like just creepy and sketchy. And it's fantastic. Like creepier than he is in Wake in Fright in Will Penny. And then number 2, probably the best film he's in outside of the Halloween franchise for me is The Great Escape from '63. Yeah. Like it's a huge ensemble cast. He's obviously not the star, but Steve McQueen, if there is a lead to that movie, it's McQueen. But then there's all these great actors in this ensemble piece set in a prison, and Pleasence is one of the standouts. He's really great in that too. So if you have not seen The Great Escape, definitely check that one out. And then again, number 1 is basically Halloween, and then all of the sequels. The only sequel I really don't like much is Halloween 5. And then the theatrical cut of Halloween 6 is pretty rough. That's the last one Pleasence did. Like that movie came out in October of 95. He died in February of 95. So the last installment he's in was months after his death. And we've talked about it before. You know, I really like H2O, the 1998 movie that brought back Jamie Lee. I'm like, God, if he had lived just a few more years, imagine the power that could have been to have brought, because really only he and Jamie Lee only share screen time for like 2 seconds in the first movie, and then 2-3 minutes at the end of the second. How cool it would have been to have brought them together again in H2O in 98.
Together like the whole time.
It would have been, even if he had just come in at the end, I mean, it would have been like a standing ovation in the theater. It would have been amazing. So I always, it's just so bad. It's just too bad he didn't live long enough to be a part of H2O. But Halloween is his iconic performance as Sam Loomis. A movie. You know how long he worked on Halloween?
I'm thinking maybe a week.
Yeah, 5 days. They had him for 5 days. His iconic performance in, a career spanning decades, he worked on that movie for 5 days. just crazy to me. And then, of course, he's great in the sequels, but there's nothing like his performance in the original. He makes that movie work. He and Jamie Lee Curtis, and the way that Carpenter cuts back and forth between the two characters throughout the movie. I think if it was only Jamie Lee the whole time, if it was only Loomis the whole time, it wouldn't work. It's that balance. And the way that he keeps getting closer and closer and closer to her. And then in the last scene of the movie, after he shoots him off the balcony, and he has that brief exchange with Laurie Strode. I just love how two characters never meant to meet. And then the last scene, they have that little exchange. I love the way that plays out in the story. It's a big reason why I love Halloween, beyond many other things that I love about that movie, which I'll talk about at some point, I promise.
I mean, I grew up watching that movie way too young, and it's always just been. I think I hear Donald Pleasence. I only think of Halloween. I don't know anything else. I feel like maybe there's a lot of people who also feel the same way. And I mean, what you said, like bringing, like you have those characters. He doesn't know, but like he's protecting her the whole way through, but they don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And I love when movies do that, when they're separate the whole time.
Yeah.
Like you said. And and it's funny that I guess it's like I never even thought of the fact that they only have like 2 seconds together.
Yeah.
I think because also I with Halloween 2, they do have more.
A little more at the end, but not much.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's a funny thought that again, the two, the makers of that movie.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, it was like 2 seconds and that's it. And
we think of Halloween, we think of Michael Myers, of course. We also think of Sam Loomis and Laurie Strode, and screen time that Sam Loomis and Laurie Strode share in either the first or the second, very limited. We don't get to see it much. So it almost like makes you wanting more, which is great. Yeah. So yeah, that's Halloween. We'll talk about again at some point. Thank you. Oh yeah, one more time.
So when my brother came up, all my brothers came up here, and we spent the night at the Halloween house in Pasadena. So we rented
out that's right. You did that in July, right?
So yeah, we rented out the Sugar Mint house, and they, first of all, Sarah, who runs that place, is absolutely amazing. Like, she's the coolest, and all this awesome Halloween like props that we got to look at, and we got to look at also the entire their storyboard for because she had that as well, and that was really fun. Cool. But we went on a whole little drive around tour of all the scenes where they were filming stuff, and the one that's right next to the house we actually got to go like explore it a little more at night was this scene in Halloween 2 when the cop pulls up and Dr. Loomis is like, I shot him 6 times. Super dramatic. That was like in this little alleyway. Yeah. I mean, it's right next door. So we went and we walked in the alleyway. We took pictures.
Oh, that's so cool.
God, this is so much fun. And of course, at night, we went to Laurie Strode's house like 3 times. I think I just love walking in the area. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Like the the little convenience store that had been robbed was also right next door. I mean, it's all just right next to each other. It was all walkable, and my brother had the best time of his life. It was so much fun. I mean, I loved it. And we even got to have our own private screening of Halloween outside in the backyard because they didn't have one running that day. And she was okay. I want a private screening. Like, we can totally do it. And I believe in a writer who's writing a new movie. I forget. It's a new horror movie. I forget what it is. But he was renting a room in the Michael Myers house. While
writing?
Yeah, he's writing.
That's perfect.
Like, oh, this is so cool. We saw him turn on his light. We can't see him. We see the light go on. We're like, oh my God. This is so cool.
Yeah, I did that in 2003. I got to see if you're a Halloween fan, you have got to make your way to Pasadena, California. And as you say, they're all kind of close together. You don't have to drive they're all kind of close together, and you can see it. And a lot of it, some of it has changed, but some of it still looks the same, especially when you look at down the streets and the sidewalks and stuff. And it's so cool. Yeah, you got to check it out.
Oh yeah.
All right. Thanks, Andrew, for being on again today. If you haven't listened to our episode from July, we talked about Sunday, Bloody Sunday with Peter Finch, another film with gay themes, which is also really interesting, with Peter Finch and Glenda Jackson. So check that out. That aired in July. And thanks so much for being on again today. Did you want to promote anything or tell us where we can find you online, Andrew?
Not too much to promote. I mean, I'm on social media, ARCam194. I'm extremely excited for the new Halloween that comes out in 2 months?
Halloween Kills. Yeah, this will be dropping at the end of September. So by the time this drops, we're just a few weeks away from Halloween Kills.
I cannot wait. I'm so excited to see a lot of the Easter. Again, I already saw Easter eggs of Halloween 3 stuff is already in there. So
some of the stars from Halloween, the original, are back.
Yes,
Nancy Stevens, Charles Cipher, Kyle Richards are back, which is really exciting.
Bring up Dr. Loomis. They have to talk about him.
I hope Loomis there's something to do with Loomis, even if they just talk about him, would be cool. In the new ones,
a hint, or just like his photos in the background, like anything like that would just make my day.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks again for being here, Andrew, and thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.